The sound of a baby's cry pierced the silence of the vast Wyoming prairie, carried on a wind that whispered through the golden grass. Ruby Nelson clutched her infant daughter closer to her chest, tears streaming down her face as she placed the tiny bundle into a woven basket lined with the only blanket she could spare. The year was 1878, and at 22, Ruby had reached the end of her rope. "I promise I'll come back for you, my sweet Lily," she whispered, pressing a final kiss to her baby's forehead. "This isn't forever. Mama just needs to find work in a safe place. Then I'll return." Ruby's hands trembled as she tucked a folded note beside her 3-month-old daughter. The stagecoach station was less than a quarter-mile away. Someone would find her baby before long. With one last agonizing look, Ruby placed the basket near the road, concealed just enough in the tall grass to keep Lily safe from the direct sun, but visible enough to be discovered. As Ruby disappeared into the distance, her heart shattering with each step, she didn't see the rider approaching from the opposite direction. Keith Harrington pulled back on the reins of his chestnut mare, squinting against the setting sun. At 27, he'd spent nearly a decade working cattle across the Wyoming territory, building a modest ranch of his own over the past 3 years. The day's journey to deliver 3 horses to the neighboring property had gone smoothly, and now he was eager to return home. A peculiar sound caught his attention, the unmistakable cry of an infant. Keith frowned, scanning the seemingly empty landscape. The noise came again, more insistent this time, and he guided his horse toward it. "What in tarnation?" he muttered, spotting a basket partially hidden in the tall grass. Dismounting, Keith approached cautiously, half expecting some kind of trap. Instead, he found himself staring down at her red-faced infant, tiny fists waving in the air as she wailed. Keith removed his hat, running a hand through his sandy brown hair in disbelief. "Hello there, little one," he said softly, crouching beside the basket. The baby's cries subsided momentarily as curious blue eyes studied him. Keith noticed the note and unfolded it with one hand. "Please care for my Lily," it read in a delicate script. "I have no means to provide for her. I will return when I can." Keith exhaled slowly, looking around for any sign of the mother, but the prairie stretched empty in all directions. The sun was sinking fast, and with it, the temperature would drop dangerously low. He couldn't leave an infant out here alone. "Well, Miss Lily," Keith said, carefully lifting the basket, "looks like you're coming home with me." The ride back to his ranch was slow and careful. Keith balanced the basket in front of him, one arm securing it while the other held the reins. The baby had quieted, lulled by the gentle rocking motion of the horse. As his modest ranch house came into view, Keith felt a wave of uncertainty. He knew nothing about caring for babies. His nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, and the town of Silverbrook was a half-day's ride. But something about the abandoned child stirred protective instincts he hadn't known he possessed. "We'll figure this out," he promised the sleeping infant as he dismounted and carried her toward the house. The next morning brought new challenges. Lily had cried through most of the night, only quieting when Keith warmed some cow's milk and managed to feed her with a clean cloth dipped in the liquid. He'd fashioned a makeshift bed from a drawer lined with blankets, but neither he nor the baby had slept well. "I reckon we need supplies," Keith told Lily as he paced the floor, the baby cradled awkwardly in his arms, "and maybe some advice." By mid-morning, Keith had packed the essentials for a journey to town. He fashioned a sling from a clean sheet, securing Lily against his chest. It wasn't ideal, but it allowed him to ride while keeping the baby safe. The citizens of Silverbrook weren't accustomed to seeing a rugged cowboy with an infant strapped to his chest. Heads turned as Keith made his way down the main street, Lily gurgling contentedly against him. Martha Wilson, the shopkeeper's wife, was the first to approach. "Keith Harrington, what on earth do you have there?" Keith explained the situation as a small crowd gathered around him. Soon, the women of Silverbrook were offering advice, supplies, and assistance. By afternoon, he had a proper baby bottle, cloth diapers, a few simple gowns, and more advice than he could possibly remember. "You should take her to the orphanage in Cheyenne," suggested Theodore Grant, the town's mayor. "A baby needs a mother, not a bachelor rancher who knows more about cattle than children." "I'll keep her until her mother returns," Keith replied firmly. "The note said she's coming back." Doubt clouded the faces around him, but Keith stood resolute. He didn't fully understand his own determination, but something told him he needed to give this baby's mother a chance. 3 days later, as Keith was hanging freshly washed diapers on the line outside his cabin, he spotted a figure approaching on foot. A woman, her dress dusty from the road, stumbled toward the ranch with obvious exhaustion. Keith squinted against the sunlight, then set aside the laundry and strode toward her. Ruby Nelson had walked for 2 days, returning to the spot where she'd left Lily only to find her baby gone. Panic-stricken, she'd followed rumors from the stagecoach station about a cowboy who'd ridden through with an infant. Hope and fear battled within her as she finally reached the ranch she'd been directed to. When she saw the tall man walking toward her, Ruby's courage nearly failed. But the sight of baby clothes on the line gave her hope. "Are you the one who found a baby?" "My baby," she called out, her voice cracking with emotion. Keith studied the woman carefully. Her auburn hair was wind-blown, her green eyes red from crying or lack of sleep, probably both. She looked young, desperate, and thoroughly heartbroken. "I found her," he confirmed, watching the woman's face collapse in relief. "She's inside, sleeping." Ruby's legs nearly gave way. Thank God she's safe. "Please, can I see her?" Keith hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Follow me." Inside the cabin, Ruby rushed to the makeshift cradle where Lily slept peacefully. A sob escaped her as she gently touched her daughter's cheek. "I'm so sorry, my sweet girl. Mama came back just like I promised." Keith watched from across the room, conflicted emotions swirling within him. In just a few days, he'd grown attached to the infant, yet seeing the raw love on the mother's face, he knew he had no right to interfere. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. Ruby Nelson." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "And you are Keith Harrington. This is my ranch." Ruby nodded, wiping her tears. "Thank you for saving her. I know what I did was terrible, but I was desperate. I lost my job at the hotel in Cheyenne and we were evicted. I thought if I could just find work in Silverbrook." "Did you?" Keith interrupted. Ruby's face fell. "No, nobody wants to hire a single mother with an infant." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know what to do now, but I'll find something. I won't abandon her again." Keith studied the young woman, noting the determination beneath her exhaustion. "You both can stay here tonight," he offered. "It's getting dark and it's not safe to travel." Relief flooded Ruby's face. "Thank you. Just for tonight, then we'll be on our way." That night, after preparing a simple supper, Keith insisted Ruby take his bed while he slept on a bedroll by the fireplace. Ruby fell asleep with Lily cradled beside her, too exhausted to protest the arrangement. In the morning, Keith was already up, cooking breakfast when Ruby emerged with Lily in her arms. "I was thinking," Keith said, setting plates on the table, "I could use some help around here. The house needs tending and I'm away with the cattle most days." Ruby eyed him suspiciously. "What are you suggesting, Mr. Harrington?" "A job," Keith clarified quickly. "Room and board for you and the little one plus wages, just until you find something better." Ruby wanted to decline to maintain her independence, but the smell of cooking food reminded her of how hungry she was and how few options she had. "Why would you help us? You don't know me." Keith shrugged, uncomfortable with examining his motives too closely. "Been on my own since I was 16. Know what it's like to need a helping hand." After a long moment, Ruby nodded. "We'll stay, then, temporarily." The arrangement began awkwardly. Ruby was determined to earn her keep, throwing herself into cleaning the cabin that clearly hadn't seen a woman's touch in years. Keith, accustomed to solitude, found himself constantly aware of the mother and child in his home. But Lily proved to be the bridge between them, her smiles and coos drawing them together despite their reservations. As spring turned to summer, a routine developed. Keith taught Ruby about ranch life, how to collect eggs from the chickens he kept, tend the vegetable garden, and even help with the horses. Ruby, in turn, transformed his bachelor cabin into a home, cooking meals that made him realize how poorly he'd been eating all these years. On warm evenings, they would sit on the porch, Lily sleeping in Ruby's lap as they talked. Keith learned that Ruby had been orphaned at 16, worked as a seamstress until meeting a charming traveler who promised marriage but disappeared when she told him about the baby. Ruby discovered that Keith had lost his parents to influenza, struck out on his own, and built his modest ranch through years of hard work. One evening in late July, as they watched a spectacular sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Keith realized with startling clarity that he no longer wanted this arrangement to be temporary. "Ruby," he said, his voice unusually hesitant, "I've been thinking about the future." Ruby tensed slightly. She'd been dreading this conversation, knowing their idyllic existence couldn't last forever. "Oh, I know you plan to move on eventually, but—" Keith paused, struggling to find the right words. "Having you and Lily here, it's been good, better than good." Ruby's heart quickened. "It has been nice," she admitted softly. "What if you stayed?" Keith suggested, staring at the horizon rather than meeting her eyes. "Not as my housekeeper," but as he stopped, suddenly aware of how presumptuous he might sound. "As what, Keith?" Ruby prompted, hardly daring to hope. Before he could answer, the sound of approaching horses interrupted them. 3 riders appeared in the fading light, and Keith stood, immediately alert. He recognized one as James Cooper, a rancher whose property bordered his own. "Evening, Harrington," Cooper called, dismounting. "Got trouble heading your way, thought you should know." Keith stepped forward, instinctively positioning himself between the men and Ruby. "What kind of trouble?" Cooper nodded toward Ruby. "Man in town asking about a woman with a baby. Says his name is Edward Blackstone. Claims the woman stole from him before running off." Ruby gasped, clutching Lily tighter. "That's not true," she whispered, her face pale. "That's Lily's father. He abandoned us when I told him about the baby." Cooper shrugged. "Don't know the truth of it, but he's got the sheriff listening. Said they might ride out this way tomorrow." After Cooper and his men departed, Ruby was trembling. "I need to leave," she said, rushing into the cabin. "He'll take Lily from me. He has money, connections." "No one will believe me over him." Keith followed her inside, watching as she frantically gathered her few possessions. "Ruby, stop. Running won't solve this." "You don't understand," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "Edward is from a wealthy family in Boston. He came west looking for adventures before settling into his father's business. When I told him about the baby, he accused me of trying to trap him, said I'd been with other men. He threatened to have me arrested if I tried to claim the child was his." Keith gently took her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I won't let him take Lily, or you. How can you stop him?" Ruby asked, despair evident in her voice. Keith took a deep breath. "Marry me." Ruby stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What?" "Marry me," Keith repeated, more confidently this time. "Tonight. Pastor Johnson lives just 4 miles from here. If we're married, if I claim Lily as my own, it gives us standing against him." "Keith, you can't. This is madness. You tie yourself to me, to my problems." Keith's hands moved from her shoulders to cradle her face. "It's not madness. These past months, watching you with Lily, seeing your strength and kindness, I've fallen in love with you, Ruby. I think maybe I started falling that first day when you walked miles to find your baby. I was going to ask properly someday, but we don't have that luxury now." Ruby's mind whirled. She'd been fighting her growing feelings for Keith, convinced he only saw her as a responsibility, a charity case. "You love me," she whispered. "More than I thought possible," Keith admitted. "And I love that little girl like she's my own. I want to be her father, a real father, not just in name." Ruby searched his eyes, finding nothing but sincerity. In that moment, she allowed herself to acknowledge what her heart already knew. "I love you too," she said softly. "I've tried not to, but—" Keith's smile transformed his face. "Then marry me, not just because of Blackstone, but because we belong together." 3 hours later, by the light of lanterns in Pastor Johnson's small home, Ruby and Keith exchanged vows. The elderly minister's wife served as witness, cradling Lily during the brief ceremony. By the time they returned to the ranch, Ruby Nelson had become Ruby Harrington. "We should sleep," Keith said as they stood awkwardly in the cabin's main room. "Tomorrow will be difficult." Ruby nodded, grateful for his understanding. Though they were legally married, their relationship needed time to adjust to this sudden change. Keith prepared his bedroll by the fire as he had done since Ruby's arrival. Morning brought sunshine and the sound of horses. Keith was already dressed and armed when Ruby emerged from the bedroom with Lily. "Stay inside," he instructed, kissing her forehead gently. "Let me handle this first." Ruby nodded, fear evident in her eyes. "Be careful." Keith stepped onto the porch as Sheriff Davis and 3 other men rode into the yard. One man, dressed in fine Eastern clothes despite the dust of travel, surveyed the ranch with obvious disdain. "Morning, Sheriff," Keith called, his posture relaxed though his right hand remained near his holster. Sheriff Davis, a fair but no-nonsense lawman, tipped his hat. "Harrington, this here is Mr. Edward Blackstone. Says he's looking for a woman and child who might be staying with you." "That's so," Keith replied evenly. Blackstone urged his horse forward. "Her name is Ruby Nelson. She worked at the hotel in Cheyenne before disappearing with valuable items belonging to me. I've tracked her here." "What items would those be exactly?" Keith asked. Blackstone's jaw tightened. "A silver pocket watch and several banknotes, family heirlooms as well." "Interesting," Keith commented. "And the child, a complications," Blackstone said dismissively. "She claims the baby is mine, but that's impossible. The woman has loose morals. The child could be anyone's." Keith's expression darkened. "I'd watch your words carefully, Blackstone." "That's my wife and daughter you're slandering." A stunned silence followed his statement. "Your wife?" Sheriff Davis finally asked. "Yes, sir, Ruby Harrington, formerly Nelson. We were married last night by Pastor Johnson, been courting since spring." Keith produced the marriage certificate from his pocket. "As for the child, little Lily is my daughter now, legally adopted." Blackstone's face flushed with anger. "She's lying to you, Harrington. That woman is a thief and worse." "Strange accusation coming months after she supposedly robbed you," Keith observed. "Why wait so long to report this theft?" "I had business matters to attend to first," Blackstone snapped. "Well, I suggest you attend to them elsewhere," Keith replied firmly. "My wife isn't going anywhere with you." The door opened behind him and Ruby stepped out, her head held high despite her trembling hands. "I never stole anything from you, Edward. You know that. You gave me the watch as a gift and I left it in the hotel room when you threw me out." Blackstone's eyes narrowed. "No court will believe a woman like you over me." "Maybe not," Sheriff Davis interjected, "but they'll have to contend with her husband's testimony as well, and Pastor Johnson's and mine." He turned to Blackstone. "I've known Keith Harrington for years. He's a man of his word. If he says this woman is his wife and that child is his daughter, that carries weight with me." "This is outrageous," Blackstone sputtered. "You demand nothing here," Sheriff Davis cut him off. "You've made accusations without proof. Meanwhile, these folks have legal documents and witnesses to their claims." He tipped his hat to Ruby. "Madam, congratulations on your marriage." Ruby's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Thank you, Sheriff." After a few more heated exchanges, Blackstone and the others rode away, with Sheriff Davis promising to escort the Easterner to the territorial border. When they were finally alone, Ruby threw herself into Keith's arms. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "You saved us." Keith held her close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. "I meant every word, Ruby. I want to be Lily's father. I want to be your husband in every way." Ruby looked up at him, her green eyes shining. "I want that too." That night, after Lily was asleep in her cradle, husband and wife truly began their life together. Their love no longer held back by uncertainty or hesitation. The years that followed brought many changes to the Harrington Ranch. With Ruby's practical mind for business and Keith's ranching knowledge, they gradually expanded their property and herds. The small cabin grew into a proper house, with rooms added as their family expanded, first with twins Samuel and Sarah in 1880, then with Joseph in 1883. Lily grew into a beautiful, spirited girl who could ride as well as any boy and shared her mother's talent for sewing. Though she knew the story of her birth father, she never considered Keith anything less than her true father. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Keith and Ruby sat on their expanded porch, watching their children play in the summer twilight. Lily, now almost 6, was teaching the 3-year-old twins a clapping game while baby Joseph slept in Ruby's arms. "Did you ever imagine this?" Ruby asked, leaning against her husband's shoulder. "That day when you found a baby in a basket," Keith smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "Not in my wildest dreams. I was just trying to do the right thing." Ruby turned her face up to his. "Sometimes doing the right thing leads to the best things." Keith kissed her softly. "Finding you and Lily was the best thing that ever happened to me, even better than when Mr. Campbell sold you that prize bull for half price." Ruby teased, referencing a business coupe Keith still bragged about. Keith laughed, the sound carrying across their prosperous ranch. "Even better than that, though don't tell Campbell I said so." As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Ruby thought about the desperate young woman who had once left her baby by the roadside, believing she had nothing to offer. That woman could never have imagined the love and family that would grow from that heartbreaking moment. "Thank you for picking us up that day," she whispered. Keith's arms tightened around her. "Thank you for coming back." The Wyoming night settled around the Harrington family, a family built not from blood ties but from courage, second chances, and a love that had begun with a baby in a basket and a cowboy who couldn't ride away. In the years that followed, whenever travelers passed through Silverbrook and heard the story of Keith and Ruby Harrington, they marveled at how fate had brought together two souls who might never have met otherwise. The tale became something of a local legend, proof that even in the harsh realities of the frontier, love could take root and flourish in the most unexpected circumstances. And Ruby, who had once known only abandonment and heartbreak, found herself surrounded by a love so complete it healed all her past wounds. The basket that had once held her desperate hope now sat in their parlor, filled with mementos of their life, together a testament to how far they had come from that dusty road where a cowboy and an abandoned baby girl had first crossed paths.